Are we streaming?
I think we might be on now. Yeah.
Welcome.
Here you go.
Welcome
No,
to
I'll
the
go. No, you go.
welcome to the Critical Christian Podcast. We're your host Dan.
And Justin, we ask critical questions about the Bible and provide mostly questionable answers.
I think we provide a lot of good answers.
Actually, we've come up with a few pretty good ones, actually.
Oh yeah, bangers.
There's a couple questions without answers, though. Unfortunately, that's kind of a consequence of doing these things as well.
No, there's a lot of questions without answers too.
Yeah, that happens.
Not just a couple.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyways, Dan, we're on Exodus.
Whoa.
We made our first week from chapters 1 and 2, which were not as long as some of the other chapters of the Bible. Basically, we've learned that Moses, just like Sargon the Great, was set into a basket and sent down the river in an effort to prevent him from being basically executed by the Egyptians.
Right.
And then he grows up. He's a Hebrew. At some point, he learns he's a Hebrew. And then he gets into a quarrel with an Egyptian who kills a Hebrew. Kills the Egyptian. Or actually, did the Egyptian kill a Hebrew or did it injure him?
I don't think it killed him.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think he did. Moses, though, in a fit of rage, killed the Egyptian, buried him under the sand, then fled to Midian. And, and then he met his future father-in-law.
That's right.
Reuel. Also known as Jethro.
Unfortunately.
Also known as Reuel.
Yep.
Also known as Jethro.
All right.
Also known as Reuel.
Been having fun?
Anyways, so we're picking up with Moses in Midian at the beginning of chapter 3.
All right.
And we're going to encounter a couple new characters and some new geography. It's going to be really exciting.
All right.
Then can you read our intro here, verse 1?
Sure. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. That was it. Mountain of God, period.
Right.
So why is there a mountain called the mountain of God?
Yeah, so that's the thing is I'm not entirely sure the text is trying to say that it was called or named the mountain God. Like, I don't know if they literally used to...
Actually, what does Horeb mean? Did we look into that?
We did not, but it's also irrelevant because it's also Mount Sinai.
Oh, that's the one where something happened.
Now, according to the Hebrew Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament, Horeb or Horevah means the mountain of legislation, which makes sense because Hor or Har is typically a hill or a mountain. So like if you remember Armageddon from the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
It's actually just like a bad English saying. It's actually two words. It's Har, or mountain, and Mageddon or Megiddo. So it'd be like the mountain of Megiddo. So anyways,
I remember reading that.
According to at least this Hebrew and Aramaic dictionary, the name Horeb means the mountain of legislation, which is really interesting because what happened at Mount Sinai?
Probably the Ten Commandments.
That's right.
Bam. Except it didn't happen yet.
And I would imagine that you could possibly say that maybe Horeb was a nickname for the mountain because that's where the Ten Commandments were given. The mountain of legislation.
Well, it was also called Sinai then.
Well, that was because of the geographical region that it was in.
It was in
Sinai. But all the laws were given at Mount Sinai too. It says in Leviticus and Deuteronomy that God gave all the laws to Moses at the foot of Mount Sinai. So technically it is the mountain of the law.
So you think Horeb is maybe just a nickname?
It could be. Yeah, it could be a nickname that was attributed to it. as opposed to calling it by its literal name. Much
Mm-hmm.
like we would say sometimes when referring to the White House, we would say the Oval Office,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know? So that's certainly a thing. So that's one possibility. Yeah. Makes you wonder, though, why the text goes back and forth between Sinai and Horeb,
Well,
you know?
I don't know if it makes me wonder.
I know, I
That's
think we already know, don't we?
Is it like the North and the South doing their thing?
It's the documentary hypothesis. I
All
checked
right.
the sources with Richard Elliott Freeman, and it's a mixture of going back and forth between the Elohist and the Yahwist text. And
That was,
then I'm sure there's more than that. There's
was
probably
it,
some priestly editing too.
that was nice of them to, keep things separate so we could dissect it 2,000 years later.
Yeah, so a couple of things.
Or
It looks like Jethro and Horeb we might be able to tie to a particular strain of authorship. So like if Jethro and Horeb are signs of like the Elohist, then those are some indicators. And that's what I've got in
so that's maybe why he's called Rael.
yeah. So in Exodus chapter 3, according to the documentary hypothesis, the first verse is attributed to the Elohist. And it uses the name Jethro, and it calls the mountain Horeb. Now, if you go to the previous passage in verse 18, previous chapter, it says, they came to Reuel, their father, and said, and this is attributed to the Yahwist. So it seems that Reuel might be the name used by the Yahwist, and Jethro and Horeb might be the name that is used by the Elohist. But we can keep track as we read on. I'm curious when Sinai shows up instead of Horeb. I'll be curious to know if it gets pinpointed as an Elohist text or Yahwist text. I assume it's going to be a Yahwist, but we'll find out when we get there.
All right, I'll look forward to that.
Not that Richard Elliott Freeman is the only person who has dissected the text by authorship, but I think he's pretty safe go-to for a reference. Let's see now. I didn't have any questions actually on the first chapter or first verse, but I think both of us have the same question for the next verse. Let's read it.
And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. So the angel of the Lord is God?
That is a question that many people have tried to answer. And I have my own answer, what I think, but it's not bulletproof. And the reason why it's not bulletproof is because we don't have manuscripts that are as old as what we would like.
Okay.
But here's my thesis. We have seen with the manuscript traditions that there's definitely editorial work going on where there are passages in some of the old manuscripts that say Yahweh did something. And then in later subsequent manuscripts, it gets changed to the angel of Yahweh. And the theory is that there are some instances where like scribes and priests felt a little uneasy saying that Yahweh did something or that Yahweh interacted with humanity in a particular way.
Why?
Well, because during the exile, and especially during the post-exile, they made a huge move towards a God that has more omni properties.
Okay.
While they were in the land of Israel, it was okay to think of your God as being tangible and regional. But what do you make of your God when you've been exiled to another country?
Right. Yeah.
Now you need a bigger God. You need a God that is transcendent, right? And so this more tangible God, this more man-like God, this more Mesopotamian sounding God kind of fell out of favor, and they started going back and adding Yahweh, angel of Yahweh instead of Yahweh in a number of places.
Oh, okay.
And we do have evidence that this has happened for sure. We've seen the manuscripts where they've added it as later additions. The problem is our manuscript traditions for the Old Testament aren't actually that old. They only go back to like the 3rd century BCE, which is over 1,000 years past the events of Moses' life.
Okay.
So it's hard to know if the type of redactions that we see later on had been going on for a longer period of time. You know what I mean? But it makes sense of it because there's no reason to call the angel of Yahweh Yahweh, which is kind of what we have here. The angel of Yahweh is always addressed as though they are Yahweh, which there's a second theory as to why that could be. The second theory is basically it's like divine emissary theory, which is essentially that a king or a ruler or a god could put his royal name on somebody, and then they are basically acting
Right.
in concert for that person. And we see this in ancient Near Eastern texts. In fact, there are some Amarna tablets where some emissaries for the pharaoh are treated as though they are equal status with Pharaoh.
And we got Moses in a little bit doing the same thing.
It seems that way. And in Exodus 23, God says that he's going to send an angel to go before them.
Okay.
And he says, what do you say? But do not sin, because he will not forgive your sins, because my name is in him. Which is kind of interesting. That kind of seems to follow the idea that if God puts his name on one of, like he hand selects a special angel and puts his name in the angel, that he's granting it some kind of authority to act on his behalf, right? And so that's one possible way to looking at these angel of Yahweh passages. You know what I mean? But like every other theory, there's counter theories. The counter to that theory is that portion of Exodus was a later addition that was designed to explain the angel of Yahweh, because at some point people became aware that there wasn't a good explanation for the angel of Yahweh that got added to the text. So then they added this little snippet in Exodus that explains how the angel of Yahweh functions. And we know that this tradition grows over time, because by the time you get to the writings of Zechariah, the angel of Yahweh seems like a fully formed, fully separate individual from Yahweh. In fact, in the book of Zechariah, Yahweh and the angel of Yahweh speak to each other.
Oh.
They just get more and more distinct from each other as time goes on. That makes sense. It's almost like the tradition or the teaching about the angel of Yahweh it grows and is expanded over time, because people are like figuring it out as they're going. You know what I mean? So there's a couple ways to think about this, like, you know, who the angel of Yahweh is, why he's treated as though he is Yahweh, and whether or not it was an addition to the text or whether or not it was just like a divine emissary. I don't know if anyone really knows.
I guess if it is an angel who is given authority by God, then that's pretty much God, so it might not even matter, right?
Right. There is a third theory that you might be interested in.
Okay.
Which is that it's Jesus.
Oh. Okay.
I don't think that's true. Jesus is not. It's supposed to be an angel.
Yeah, but it's the human form.
Right. That's exactly it. So if you believe that the angel
right?
of Yahweh is a physical manifestation of Yahweh.
Yeah. Right.
And if you believe that Jesus is the tangible image of the invisible God.
Yeah.
Then you could say that Jesus is the angel of Yahweh. Every time that Yahweh manifests himself in human form, you would say, well, that was Jesus, right? So that's kind of the Christian take on it. The only problem you have with that is that if Jesus was Yahweh, you would have expected him to come and just clearly say, I'm Yahweh. And unfortunately, his name was Yeshua.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
again, like there are theories, there's ways to consider what the angel of the Lord was, but I don't, if there was a definitive answer, like we wouldn't be asking the question right now, would we?
Probably not.
Like it would be clear.
I know we had a similar argument in Genesis, right? During the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Yeah, there was some definitely some questions there.
Because I know we were trying to figure out if it was God or angels or
Right.
what have you.
Yeah, because it appeared like Yahweh manifested with two of his angels.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you correctly pointed out that they're probably angels of death, which are a real classification of angel. And Yahweh, according to Genesis 18, seems to clearly be at least one individual from the two.
Mm-hmm.
Because later on, like around verse 21, it says that the two men went on to Sodom, but Moses stayed behind talking to Yahweh.
Right. Yeah.
Which seems to indicate that the two men were distinct from Yahweh.
Mm.
And then they're never referred to as Yahweh,
Right.
ever. The two men
Yeah.
are always referred to as either angels or men, right? So there's some things there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, that's a lot for that. We could talk all day about the angel of Yahweh, to be honest. It's like people have written books on it.
Okay. Let's not do that.
I'm okay with actually not having a definitive answer.
I mean, you're gonna have to be okay. It's the Bible.
I know, right? Let's read verses 3 and 4. Oh, did you have more?
I did because.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So this was talking about. Can you scroll up?
Yeah.
This was also talking about the burning bush. You know, and I wanted to discuss that quite a bit. I was gonna look it up some more, but instead I didn't. But I thought one theory was that because I know in the desert it gets hot and things do spontaneously combust, right? And so people would think, wow, that's crazy. That must be God or something. But it just happens. And I don't know about you, but like whenever I read about miracles in the Bible, my first thought is, okay, how can we replicate this? And to me, that's not me saying that it wasn't a miracle. What I'm saying is God made the universe, and it's actually more impressive if it's reproducible. I feel like if it's just hand waved away as magic, then it's a cop out. It's a non-explanation, and it's actually not very interesting.
Right.
I know. I guess we'll get to this later when Moses parts the Red Sea. Right, that there was some talk about ways it could actually happen, and my point is just I find it more interesting to be able to figure out how to do it for real.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes if there's a way that you could explain it to say, you know what, if God had just manipulated
Right.
these elements in a particular way, it'd be easy for him to do rather than just saying, well, it was a miracle.
Yeah, and that also makes Jesus' resurrection even more impressive because that would be the one time that he didn't just use the rules of the universe. Now I know there are some healings he did and all that, but I'm going to ignore those for now.
Right, sure. Yeah, so the burning bush to me, I always went the route that you didn't like. I always just was like, well, God did a miracle. Because I'm like, I mean, a bush would burn up, you would think, right? So, I mean, that doesn't mean that God couldn't work within the laws of physics. Maybe he was manifesting, moisture, as he was manifesting himself as a flame inside of a bush.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's certainly a possibility. But I think that's why Moses was drawn to it, was because it was like, well, this is not something that happens.
Well, I mean, even a bush spontaneously combusting does not happen that often, so I think he'd still be drawn to it.
You haven't seen one yet?
I haven't.
Oh, yeah. My dad actually claimed to see it happen once.
Oh.
He said it's a whole story, actually. My dad claimed that he saw a pile of brush spontaneously combust in the rain.
A little more impressive.
He thought it was an act of God.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't say to that, but it is more likely an act of God if it's wet.
You
right?
would think so. It's kind of a Elijah versus the prophets of Baal situation. You know the story, right?
Oh, I think so. That's the one where they were trying to get the fire to work.
Yeah, and
it didn't work. And
Elijah said, "Pour water all over the wood and drown it." And then he made fun of the prophets of Baal and said, "Oh, your God must be sleeping or on the toilet or
right.
Yeah, it's a good narrative. That's a story that's got a little bit of everything. That's something for everybody.
Yeah. What book is that from?
That's in First Kings or Second Kings. I forget. It might be First Kings because Elijah is replaced by Elisha, and Elisha, I think, takes on the mantle in Second Kings chapter 2. So it's got to be in First Kings because in Second Kings chapter 2, Elijah goes up into heaven in a whirlwind.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Anyways, so the fire, I'm not sure what the explanation for it would be if God used a naturalistic method. I don't know what that method would be.
Yeah, but I like to think about it.
Yeah, it's certainly something to think about.
Because I would like to reproduce these things. You know, I know it's like one of those things where everything would have to be just perfect.
Right.
But that's just even more impressive.
What I was always... The curiosity for me was I always wondered what kind of a bush and how big. Because if it was a large bush, like a very sizable shrub,
yeah,
it's possible other people could have seen it. It's possible, that other people might have actually witnessed it. We just don't have their narrative. We don't have their account. Maybe they were watching from afar.
It's hard to tell. I mean, he was in a desert, right?
That's the thing, yeah, because he wandered away, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It says he fed his flock beyond the wilderness, which I assume means he left Midian and went to the foothills of Sinai, if you would call them foothills. I don't. The mountainous region of Sinai doesn't really have foothills like they have in Judea, but. Anyways, yeah. I mean, was there anyone there? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, people live there today. In fact, there's a monastery up there.
Oh.
Was it St. Catherine's, maybe? I think it's St. Catherine's Monastery.
Okay.
In fact, that's where they found one of the old Greek manuscripts of the Bible, the Sinaiticus.
Yeah. Well, maybe they need to do more digging around there then.
Well, it was a guy named von Tischendorf. He went to visit the monastery, and it turned out at the monastery they had an old copy, these old manuscripts. And because it was this old monastery and these were like commonplace to them, like some old manuscripts, whatever, right? He's like, I'm going to copy these while I'm here. And he legit copied them all while he was there. If I remember correctly, they didn't let him take them with him, but at some point in time, he was able to, I thought he smuggled them out. And then some of them got distributed. I forget, somebody who paid him to go on the trip ended up getting a certain portion of it. It's a long story, but if you just look up like the von Tischendorf narrative of the Sinaiticus manuscripts, it's a fun story. I recommend it.
All right.
Well, there's some parts of the story that are legendary, though.
Legendary.
Yeah, like if you read the King James onlyist version of the story, they embellish it with all kinds of like anti-Tischendorf rhetoric because they believe that the Sinaiticus manuscript was an evil, bad copy that should have been thrown in the trash because since the King James Bible didn't need it, nobody should need it because it wasn't available when the King James Bible was translated.
Now this is over my head, obviously.
Yeah. It's a lot. Anyway, the long and short of it is, I mean, Moses was out in the Sinai Peninsula, probably nobody around.
Right.
The burning bush may or may not have been observed by anyone.
Right.
Yeah. But if there were no witnesses, do you think he told anyone about this?
Oh, I mean, we know he did, right?
But I mean, he told people about the message, but do you think he told people about the bush?
I would presume so. I would imagine he would want to tell people that God came in a burning bush.
They probably believed him
They did believe him.
because his father-in-law was a priest.
Mm. That probably helped
Yeah.
for the legitimacy.
Yeah.
But, you know, he also had his cool little snake staff.
Yeah, he did. I also still believe that he learned. I'm not alone. Scholars agree with this. I think Moses, if he really existed, probably learned about Yahwism from Jethro. I
Mhm.
think Jethro was a Yahwist priest.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that a little bit.
Yeah. Anyways, should we move on to the next verse?
Let's do it.
We only got like 75 more left to go.
Yeah. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. I got nothing on that.
Isn't it funny how it says God called from the bush when previously it said the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And just the way they flip back and forth between the angel of the Lord and God really makes you like question how they combined the source material.
Right.
And let me see what Richard Elliott Freeman had. The angel of Yahweh, he's got listed as a Yahwist source. For the sections where it says God called, this won't surprise you. It's listed as an Elohist source because God is Elohim. So I think where it talks about Yahweh, obviously as typical, it's the Yahwist. Where it talks about God, as we've seen from Genesis, it's Elohim. It's referring to the Elohist redaction. I think that's a good way to define that.
Yeah, I'd like to see the original ones before they were cut and pasted and all that.
There is a project online where somebody went through and they created just the Yahwist source. And then they did just an Elohist source. You can actually find that online.
Well, what I mean is, like, this one says God called to him. So obviously there were two stories.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see both of them
the parts that are missing.
Yeah.
Actually, that brings up a good point. I'll check to see if I can find the stories with the individual sources. If I can't, I will go through Richard Elliott Freeman's book. I'll get the online version of it and I'll just make it. I can just open up a Word document and copy and paste the different sources into their own individual narratives. Because I'd love to kind of read the individual narratives side by side without them combined. In fact, a friend of mine did that with the Noah flood narrative, and it was really cool to see that you could take apart the two different sources and still have two completely full stories. Like the story didn't miss anything.
Yeah, that's why there are two accounts in it, right?
Yeah.
And why some of them differ from the other ones.
Yeah.
They have different details. All right.
Let's read verse 6?
5.
Of course.
Then he said, Do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Sometimes I think it's hard to determine what is holy ground and what is just regular ground.
Right.
I assume taking your sandals off is similar to removing your hat, just a sign of respect.
Yeah. Well, see, holy ground means it's sacred and consecrated. And something that is sacred and consecrated, you do not want to defile with dirt.
Okay.
For example, that's why the priests in both Exodus and Leviticus are told that they need to bathe and then put on clean linens and whatnot before they can enter into the sanctuary, especially into the Holy of Holies. So I think here, basically, what he's saying is anywhere where the presence of Yahweh is, that becomes a sacred space. and the feet are kind of like the most defiling part of the human body, aside from aside from your dirty genitals.
Mm.
And so the feet and the sandals being unclean, you would have taken those off. You wouldn't have, just like still in the ancient Near East or even the modern Near East, everyone takes their shoes off at the door. So you already know my ex-wife was Egyptian.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the Egyptians that I met from her extended family, hundreds of them, I've never seen one of them ever wear their shoes past the door. In fact, most of them have a bucket of indoor flip-flops that you can wear if you walk into someone's house. Because it's so expected that you're going to take your shoes off because your shoes are dirty. It's just part of the culture that they have, hand out flip flops to anybody who doesn't want to walk around barefoot inside the house, but still have something clean on their feet. And this tradition, it just goes back a long way. You know what I mean? So that's the situation here with, take off your darn sandals.
So do we know where this place was for real?
Where?
Huh?
Where what?
This place.
Well, it's in Sinai, right?
I don't know.
It was near Horeb. I assume it's, if I had to make an assumption about what the author's doing, I think the author is foreshadowing what's going to happen later at Mount Sinai.
So do you think this land is still like holy? We just don't know where it is?
No, I think the land was only holy while the Lord's presence was there.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think the land itself is holy. I think it was just the presence of Yahweh that made it holy.
Okay.
But yeah, anything else?
Nope.
All right.
Number 6.
On to 6.
Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Afraid of what? He had seen the burning bush. He even went to take a closer look. But now he knows it's God, so he can't look anymore. Did the bush change in some way to reveal God's presence, or what changed?
So that's a funny thing is, my impression is that initially when he saw the burning bush, he didn't know it was the Lord. It wasn't until the Lord announced to himself that he was like, oh no, I cannot cast my gaze upon it. Which is an interesting thing, because later on in Exodus, Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 others see God. They look at God. So it just makes you wonder if this manifestation of Yahweh was somehow different than the manifestation of Yahweh that we see in Exodus 24, I believe.
Yeah. I'll have to wait till we get to Exodus 24, I guess.
Right.
Then I'll forget about it by then. But
this is a normal reaction. Didn't Hagar turn away when Hagar met the angel of the Lord?
I don't know. Maybe.
In the desert? Was it Genesis 16?
Yes, definitely. Verse 5.
Exactly. I forget, but she says that she has heard the voice of the Lord, or the Lord has heard her voice. I forget which one. She thinks that she has an encounter with actual Yahweh, even though it is the angel of Yahweh that she encounters. Right? Yeah, it says, the angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant and you will give birth to a son. Right? Yeah. What happens when the angel first shows up? Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Abram's wife had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave. Yep. So, yep. Now she knew that she was pregnant. Sarah said to Abraham, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms. Now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. All right. Says, do with her whatever you think is best. Then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near the spring in the desert. It was a spring that is beside the road to shore. And he said to Hagar, yada, 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 yada,
Look
yada,
like
yada.
anything.
So Hagar doesn't actually hide from the angel,
Yeah.
right? The angel talks, and that she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. So she actually doesn't turn away. Interesting. So does Hagar have more balls than Moses?
I mean, Moses just seems a little timid, regardless.
Yeah. That's a good point, because he's afraid to go speak.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
he's a chicken,
Right.
which is odd for a guy who just killed an Egyptian.
Right. I think we're going to get to that pretty soon.
Already such complex character development.
Oh, yes.
So Moses he's obviously afraid of seeing the Lord.
Right.
But it's hard to know why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, then again, it could be a product of the authorship. What if the Yahwist and the Elohist have different ideas about what it would mean to see God?
Mm.
Because in the Elohist text, Jacob sees God. Hell, Jacob wrestles with God.
Mm.
You know what I mean? He wasn't hiding.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, he nearly beat him.
Mm. Yeah.
It would seem like that they have two different conceptions of God.
Mm-hmm.
We'll check in on that.
All right. Make a note of that.
One thing, we're gonna hit it. I don't want to do it just yet. I'm gonna wait till we get to like verse 13 or 14. But I want to have a conversation about the name of God.
Okay.
There's
I know you do.
I know there's
do.
a conversation there.
I know you do. All right. 7.
That's right. Verse 7.
And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So here we go, personifying God again. Like it was just too hard back then to imagine a God that wasn't like their other gods.
Right.
First, right. I know how we mentioned maybe God wasn't omnipresent, but I think if you're going to worship someone, they better be everywhere.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. I was going to wait till verse 8 to mention it, because in verse 8 it says, I have come down to deliver them, which is an interesting turn of phrase. What do you mean you've come? Why do you need to come down to deliver them if you're going to have Moses do it?
Right, yeah.
Right? And if you're omnipresent, it would seem that you don't need to come down. But
I mean, but this isn't God writing this.
Yeah.
This is humans who don't really understand what God is, trying to put it in their own words, right?
But this is a direct quote of the Lord.
Which one?
Verse 7. This is, the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrow, so I have come down to the... So the question is, did God utter those exact words, or something similar? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's a question that everyone's going to have a different answer for. If you think that the Bible is inspired but not like dictated, then you would say, well, it was close to that, or they're writing from their own memory or something.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in like divine dictation, like the words were dictated to Moses, then you would have to accept that this is literally what he said. And if this is literally what he said, then we would have to consider what is meant when he says, I have come down to deliver them.
Mm-hmm.
Or could it be that we can take that kind of idiomatically to mean like I have manifested my presence here to deliver them, as opposed to like translocation?
Maybe he's just using words that they'll understand.
Right. But then the last question you might want to ask yourself is, where did he come down from?
From the sky, of course.
Right. right. And we've had this discussion before, but the authors of the Bible, especially the Old Testament, clearly have this expectation that all the gods live in the skies.
God is an astronaut.
He is. He's an astronaut for sure.
I'm thinking of your background.
That's like my aunt used to say, she's from Virginia. They got a lot of funny sayings down there, but she used to say, whenever it was thundering, she would say that God's hitting his wife.
Huh?
Yeah, whenever
No. It's the angels bowling.
well, that's what my dad used to say.
Okay, a little bit.
But whenever the sky was really howling,
yeah,
she would say, God's hitting his wife again, because the sky is
terrible.
is angry and howling and making noises and whatnot. Obviously, she didn't believe that about God.
Right,
That was just like an old timey Southern saying.
Yeah.
That she used to say, but I assume it, just the idea that God resides in the skies seems to be a pretty universal belief until just the modern scientific era. Yeah. Let's read verse 8.
I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Woo! Promised land, huh?
I know. We're only missing one set of ites. There's supposed to be 7 of them.
You think? Wait, did I miss one?
No, there's only 6 in this passage.
Oh.
The list of ites changes depending on which passage you're reading.
The 8.
Sometimes there's 6, sometimes there's 7.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
I'm not worrying. I definitely am not worrying. So I wonder if this really was that good of a piece of land. I mean, God kind of makes it out to be this place where everything grows, and I don't know. I'd be curious to examine how fertile it was compared to like its surroundings. I mean, I think you mentioned that present day Israel is located in the Promised Land. So is their land any better than other land? I mean, we got some pretty decent land in America. So I just wonder how it compares,
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried milk and honey?
Milk and like as a drink or something?
Yeah.
Of course not.
Have you ever tried yogurt and honey?
No.
It's absolutely divine.
Okay.
It's amazing. Just find yourself some plain Greek yogurt, put some honey in there, and just eat it.
Are you trying
you can put it on bread or toast too. You can put it on toast. It's so good. You can dip in it too. You can dip your flatbread in it.
Are you trying to tell me this is why it was named milk and honey?
I'm just saying that, like, if your land is going to be known for a delicacy, boy, milk and honey is a good one.
Okay.
I
don't know. Was it known for a delicacy?
I don't know if that land specifically was.
I thought it was just some flowery language,
It is.
This is confusing.
It is, yeah.
It's like our land being known as like the land of pizza and donuts or something.
That's about right. Yeah.
Okay.
They
just didn't have like donuts back then, or else it would have been called that, right?
I'm curious to know if they fried bread back then. We know that they had flatbread. That was super common. And we do know that they had loaf bread and different types of cakes. But did they have fried bread? You would think they'd try it.
I don't know.
They had oil.
Okay.
So, I mean, they had the necessary component to fry.
Too busy using that for their lanterns, right?
Well, they dipped too. They dipped the bread in the oil.
The oil? And then ate the bread?
Olive oil, yeah.
Oh, why don't you say olive oil? I thought you were talking about like motor oil.
Where were they going to get motor oil from?
Well, I don't know.
You think they're digging up dead dinosaurs?
Well, that's why I was confused.
No, you can burn olive oil.
Okay.
Yeah, there's different types of oils, but you can burn olive oil.
You shouldn't dip bread in motor oil.
If you're going to, I would recommend it be unused motor oil.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, if you're going to do it, that's the way to go. If you're really into barbecue flavor, you might try the already spent motor oil. Maybe like a 5W30.
Okay.
I wouldn't do anything above a 5W40. It'd be really chewy, but I don't know. That's disgusting. Even think about it, actually.
I don't know why you brought it up. All right.
So, I mean, the land, to your question though, what was the land good for?
Mm-hmm.
The southern region, like Judah, not that much. It was not good farming land at all.
The promised land?
Yeah,
It wasn't
the northern region was good land. You could farm up there.
good.
Yeah.
You could farm, or great.
It was great. It was really good for growing wheat and barley.
The best there ever was?
No.
Like Israel right now, do they use their land for growing lots of stuff?
Some.
But that's it? They don't use it? I mean, it must be fertile, right?
I don't think it's as fertile as USA.
Well, that doesn't make any sense at all.
I mean, it's still got fertile regions.
Why
You
were
can
they
just look it
making?
up.
Why are they making such a big deal out of this piece of land? Then
Well, because a lot of the narratives here have been written and edited after the fact, when the people have kind of been displaced from their land and are now looking at it with rose color glasses,
Oh, really?
just like they looked at the monarchy under King David. Was it really that great? Maybe, but it was the last time in their history where they had an actual united monarchy, and so they ignored all the bad stuff. That's like the book of Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel. They record all the bad stuff about David's life. They don't care. They just, and Kings, right? But when you go to the histories and Chronicles is written much later. Chronicles, when it looks back at David, it like leaves all the bad stuff out. It paints him as like being really awesome, way more awesome than the other historical books did. Because that's the way you look at certain parts of your history, just like we're doing it right now here in America. Like, make America great again.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, when the hell was America great? What are you talking about, right? And people are like, oh, the golden 50s. Like,
Right, yeah.
what do you mean? We were at war. Are you crazy? Like, millions of people like risked their life across the globe, and like we were incredibly racist and homophobic, and like it was, but people were like, but they have these idealistic memories of the past.
Right.
Anyways, so what I'm suggesting is that since a lot of this narrative was written so far after the fact, I think it's embellished.
Okay.
But here's a map of the fertile regions, and you can see it's mostly in the northern plains, and going all the way up to Lebanon. So once you get down here, this is Judah. This is where Judah is. This is where Jerusalem and Mount Zion would be, and then Sinai Peninsula is way down here. And so the fact of the matter is,
nobody can see that, right?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, cool.
You can guys Google the fertile regions of Israel if you want the map. There's quite a few maps it shows the fertile versus desert regions of Israel, both ancient and modern Israel. So the fact of the matter is, it's the northern region of Israel that was fertile. The southern regions were abysmal.
Okay.
Which is funny because like it says, listen what he says. I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and bring them up from that land to a good enlarged land flowing with milk and honey. But he didn't actually tell them where. He says to the place of the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites and the Jebusites.
Parasites.
Which is, it's kind of a loose confederation of different regions.
It is.
Do you think Moses was like, hey, people live there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
My guess is he didn't fully understand the fact that God was basically saying, by the way, you will have to slaughter hundreds of thousands of innocent people.
Yeah, I don't think Moses was aware of this.
Right.
Do you think the conversation would have been a little deeper if God said, by the way, you're going to have to displace and murder all these people, and also I could just click my fingers and eliminate them like I did with the Sodomites, but instead I'm going to have you go to war and unalive like 10% of your own population in the process?
Yeah, he'd probably be like, who's this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd be like, are you sure this is God?
Yeah, you know what? I think I got a bad connection. Yeah. I think this is the wrong number. Is this a collect call? Am I getting charged for this? If It makes you wonder why Moses didn't question.
No, it doesn't. Because it's obvious nobody would think about it.
True.
No, I mean, oh yeah, we're going to get some land. Great. Nobody's going to think, oh, we have to kill everybody there.
Well, that's a good point, because so far he does not say yet that they're going to take the land from these people.
Right.
He says, I'm going to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, which, as far as Moses is concerned, could just mean that like they're going to live side by side with the.
I mean, that would be everybody's assumption at that point.
That'd be my assumption.
I mean, I don't know if they even have a grudge against these people yet, right?
Mm-mm. No, in fact, all the patriarchs previously were just living there, no problem.
Right.
The only problem they had with Shechem.
Yeah.
And it seems pretty clear that in the Shechem story, it was Levi and Simeon that were like the most problematic people.
Right. If that even happened.
Right, yeah.
Because, I mean, we saw it come back later.
Right. Anyways, there's some questions about if I was in Moses' shoes, I would be asking some questions.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. You'd be like, oh, okay, sounds good to me, boss.
True, because, like, have you ever been starstruck?
Oh, yeah.
Your thinking capacity.
Right.
Not, you're not.
This guy wasn't able to think too much as it was.
Yeah, Moses is not exactly a genius.
Right, yeah.
I don't think Moses was. He could write.
I'm proud of him.
He was literate.
Oh, yeah, but that's because he was raised Egyptian.
Yeah, he was raised in a palace.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so far, he does not strike me as intelligent.
No, he gets dumber as we go along.
He angrily killed an Egyptian.
Right, yeah.
Like he didn't think that was gonna,
Mm-hmm.
And then he went out and tried to tell the Hebrews how to treat each other. Full well knowing that they know that he's not one of them, even though he knows that he is, but they don't know that he is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Something like that.
I don't know if he's that bright.
Right.
We'll keep reading because I think it's more clear actually.
Right.
Yeah. Let's read verse 9.
Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. See, that's what was wrong. God just needed new glasses. Probably was cleaning them, putting them on, and immediately was like, oh, crap. That's what I think happened, if we're personifying him. The end.
Yeah, there's definitely some questions. It makes you so it says, behold, the cry of Israel has come to me.
Mm.
How long has he been there and he didn't hear the cry?
Mm-hmm. So this is God saying all this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I think the narrator put words in God's mouth.
That seems like the most likely.
Wouldn't even make sense,
Did God just forget? Can God forget?
No.
Can an all-knowing entity forget anything?
No.
Right? So is it even possible? Because there are other passages where it says that God remembered so-and-so. Like,
right.
What do you mean he remembered so-and-so? An all-knowing God doesn't forget anything.
I mean, this is clearly just the narrator, because the narrator's like, you know what? It feels like God forgot them.
Right.
But
it makes you wonder, like, if this is the narrator kind of, being led by the Spirit to, write down what he thought God said. Like, I know it just makes you wonder, like, what part of the text can we treat as being like the authoritative word of God?
Mm-hmm. I don't know that one.
Right.
I think that's a really hard question.
It is. And I used to be of the opinion that the Bible itself isn't the word of God, but it contained the words of God. That makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. You just gotta dig through all the, other stuff that isn't the word of God.
That's the problem, is when you get to the point where you're deciding what you think the word of God is.
Right.
that you've now entered into a pretty big gray area, and then you have to wonder to yourself whether or not you're able to correctly assign,
Hmm.
whether or not you can rightly divide the word, as the conservatives would say.
I mean, I think you have to know God ahead of time, know his character.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is because every Christian believes that they're led by the Holy Spirit into all truth, because that's what Jesus said the Spirit's going to do. But have you ever seen two Christians agree on what the Bible says?
No.
So it's kind of like
Yeah, I know.
some difficulties there.
A little bit. A little bit.
Let's read verses 10 through 12.
Okay. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? So he said, I will certainly be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. So when Moses is done bringing everybody out of Egypt, then God will prove himself? Is that what it is, or am I just misunderstanding?
My understanding was twofold. One, that he will be with him during the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're right when you're questioning the sign, because the sign says, this will be a sign. Okay, well, what is this? It says, to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will serve God on this mountain. So it seems to be that the sign itself is that he will return to that mountain and serve God there, which I don't know how strong of a sign that is, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd probably be like, could I get some proof beforehand? I mean, I before I put my life on the line.
So,
I mean, that's a lot of faith, and Moses doesn't seem to have that much faith yet.
not so much.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder. There's some questions there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the way I read it, though. I agree with you. And I think again, the narrative that we're reading now, chapter 3, I think is a lot of foreshadowing
Mm-hmm.
about the rest of Exodus.
Okay.
I don't know why they need to do that, but I feel like the first two or three chapters of Exodus do a lot of foreshadowing about what's going to come next.
Because it's a story.
It is, and I feel like of all the narratives in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Exodus, it feels like a lot of it was written all at once.
Okay.
Like, if you separate the sources, like what we were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
I bet you can separate the sources on Exodus, and it'll read as though one person just sat down and wrote it all at one time, as opposed to constantly updating it over and over again over hundreds of years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, once you separate the Yahwist and the Elohist sourced, I think it's just gonna read pretty dang good. Like somebody intentionally wrote it and actually had a plot line in their head.
Right. Yeah.
Even the sections that we're reading right now, I've noticed a couple literary features that you would find in traditional Hebrew literature that have all the hallmark signs of somebody designing a story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they thought ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Anything you wanted to mention here?
Nope.
Okay, on to the next.
All right.
13.
Then Moses said to God, indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Yeah, because it's clearly the first thing they'd say. Hey, listen, we want to believe you, Moses. We really do, but without a name, I don't know, buddy. And now you're going to tell me all about the anachronism of the name or whatever.
Yeah, you nailed it. We've already talked about this
a lot. Yes.
Yeah. So this is another reason why we must be forced to conclude that there are two stories that have been stitched together. Because in this section of the story, God doesn't give him the name. He refuses to give him the name. When he asked for the name, like in verse 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am.
Right.
that's not his actual name. That's a non-answer. That's like if I said, Dan, stop being lazy. When are you going to go to the grocery store? And you're going to say, well, I'll go when I go.
Yeah, right.
Like, you're just saying, leave me alone. That's not important. I'll get there eventually. Right? And I feel like God's doing the same thing. God's like, you don't need to know my name. I'm going to be with you. You know, that this is not important.
Yeah.
Right? And then that same author, I assume, in chapter 6, reveals the name of Yahweh. I'm assuming. But the fact of the matter is, in the same passage that we're reading right now, God reveals his name accidentally. It'll make more sense as we read on.
Good. It makes no sense now. So
I know.
Well.
In the next couple of verses, he's going to tell Moses what to say to the Israelites. And part of what he tells them to say uses his name Yahweh. Even though he literally just told them, I am who I am. He never told them what his name was yet.
Well, that's cray-cray, huh?
I know, right? So, like, there's obviously two narratives. One where God, his name was never hidden. And one narrative where his name was hidden for a certain amount of time. You know what I mean? And they got mixed up here, which I think it'll become more obvious when we get through it. So I don't think we needed to read verse 14 because I just read it here.
I believe that.
Accidentally. It says, God said to Moses, I am who I am, which is not an answer.
Yeah.
What did you have to say?
People will call him the great I am. So.
Sure. And in Greek even, that was a way of referencing Yahweh as I am. And he did get known later as the I am.
Yeah.
But I'm inclined to believe that that's not his actual name. That's like a nickname or a title, right?
Yeah.
Because he does give a definitive name later. He says, this is my name, right? So.
All right. 16?
16, yeah.
Oh, no, 15.
Where is 15?
It's in the blue there.
Oh, I see. There's a mistake in the formatting of our thing.
All right. Moreover, God said to Moses, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, the Lord God of your father. What?
You just, the thing I was talking about, you just read right now.
The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations.
Yeah. And this is the contradiction text that we were referring to, because it says, God said to Moses, thus you will say to the children of Israel. So now we have a quote. This is what God wants Moses to say to the Israelites. And the quote is, in our English Bibles, it says the Lord.
Okay.
Not what it says in Hebrew. It says Yahweh Elohim, not the Lord God. So it's basically God is saying, tell them Yahweh, the God of your fathers. But they don't know who Yahweh is.
Don't they?
Well, they don't. But God hasn't revealed his name to them.
Oh, but in Genesis he did, right?
Well, that's the problem. In Genesis he did. But if you go to Exodus 6:2, he states that he didn't. Okay, so Exodus 6:2. Let me grab the NRSV.
You don't like it when God speaks?
I prefer it not in Old English. It says, God spoke to Moses, Exodus 6:2-3. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name, Yahweh, I was not known to them. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I assume nobody after that, would know the actual name of Yahweh.
Okay.
Which means it doesn't make sense that he's having Moses now go back and tell him, Yahweh Elohim of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Jacob has sent me to him. They don't know him as Yahweh Elohim. They know him as El Shaddai, according to Exodus 6. So when they combined the multiple narratives, they got a little sloppy somewhere. Something got out of order.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's happened before.
Yeah. What if it was possible that the narrative in chapter 6 was supposed to come before this section?
That's very likely, actually.
And they literally just got it out of order.
That's likely, yeah.
Yeah. Or somebody went behind and just added Yahweh to this section where it previously, and this is my theory,
Okay.
it previously probably just said Elohim rather than Yahweh Elohim. We have a lot of evidence from the Old Testament that a lot of Yahwehs, like where you see Yahweh Elohim rather than just Yahweh, a lot of those, it used to just say Elohim and they added Yahweh to it.
Well, that makes sense. Why would you have two names?
Right. So there's that.
That makes a very small amount of sense to me.
Exactly.
Nice.
So that's all I had to say about 15.
Nice. All right.
16?
Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared to me, saying, I have surely visited you and seen what is done to you in Egypt. Cool. So verse 15 and 16 both have some repetition of God's really long title for some reason. Probably could have just directed the first verse to both the children and the elders, right? So I don't know.
Interesting. So I didn't catch this when we were doing the preliminary notes. When I was doing my preliminary notes,
Okay.
it says, Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me, saying that I surely have visited you and have seen what is done to you in Egypt. Interesting. He didn't say that before, but here who's ever speaking is saying that Yahweh has now seen what has been done.
Mm-hmm.
Are we to assume that Yahweh saw the thing from the heavens?
Yes.
Or when he came down?
I don't know. None of that's true, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, it certainly could be true, because in Genesis chapter 19, when Sodom was destroyed,
Okay.
it kind of appears as though the angels and Yahweh have some sort of like divine connection.
Right.
Because the angels go and see if the city is really wicked.
Right.
And then once they determine that the city is wicked, then Yahweh rains down fire from heaven.
I get that, but I mean, I still think God is
Omnipresent.
omnipresent.
Fair enough.
So, yeah.
Fair enough. That's all I had to say on 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. 17?
Yeah. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey. It's kind of a lot of people already living in the land God says will be there. I think we already talked about this. God had probably no idea or Moses probably had no idea what God actually was asking him. You know?
I don't think he did.
Yeah.
This repetition that we're reading right now is actually part of one of those literary structures that I was referring to earlier. It seems to be that this passage is forming a pretty common chiastic structure.
Oh, I was gonna say it.
Yeah, I know it was on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, it was. I was like this.
Yep. There's quite a few of them in Exodus. In fact, there are so many of them in Exodus that a lot of people believe that it was written by one author. I obviously don't believe it was written by one author, but there's quite a bit of literary artwork in Exodus.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything to add to 17 because it's really just a repetition of what we've already heard.
We got another chapter.
I don't think we're going to make it through the next chapter. It's already...
Come on, bro.
8:30 almost.
I don't care. I do not care.
All right. Go ahead.
We got to do 2 chapters.
I don't know if that's the way that works.
We gotta.
Yeah, I'm not going to be up till midnight just because you want to do an additional chapter. I have to sleep and work in the morning. You're on summer break.
I have to sleep.
You never sleep.
All right, let's go. What's next? Actually, you know what? No, we can just have conversations about this. We have all the time in the world, then.
No, you have all the time in the world. I have to work in the morning.
Fine. All right, what are we at? 18?
I think we're on verse 18.
Then they will hear your voice, and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt. And you shall say to him, the Lord God of the Hebrews has met with us. And now please let us go 3 days. Journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. You know, I didn't know the elders came with him to see the Pharaoh.
Yeah, so this was one of the things that I was kind of curious about because, okay, we talked last week about what type of bondage they were actually in.
Right.
It obviously wasn't a form of like every person was owned as an actual slave.
Right, yeah, because they had elders and they had some sort of hierarchy and all that stuff.
It was probably more of a heavy tribute or forced labor of some kind, or they were required as a people group to provide a certain amount of bricks, kind of like when settlers first came to the US or in other countries actually, and they required that the Native Americans bring them so much gold.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? It could have been something like that, where, you know, the king or the pharaoh was just like, listen, you're here, and you know, we're gonna require you to make 40,000 bricks a day.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if they were really in slavery, Moses is not just randomly walking into Egypt and assembling the elders of Israel,
right, yeah,
to plan their escape.
Right.
That's insanity. That would never happen.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
you know, I had no idea this particular meeting with the Pharaoh even happened.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure it wasn't in the Prince of Egypt.
no,
Wait,
well, the Prince of Egypt.
Was Moses the Prince of Egypt?
Yeah.
So it was about Moses. Wait, was he the Prince of Egypt?
Well, no.
Who was the Prince of Egypt?
Technically Joseph.
But it's not about Joseph, that movie?
I mean, Moses was a prince because his mother was the princess. He was adopted.
Oh, I guess. And
But technically, Joseph would have been the real prince because Joseph was
the Prince
second
of Egypt
in command.
was about Joseph?
I have not seen the movie since it came out. I don't even remember the storyline.
Well, it's like a cartoon.
I'm sure it is. I'm just telling you how definitions work, though.
I heard it had a nice soundtrack.
I'm sure it did.
All right, whatever. Talk, and I'm going to look it up.
All right, you look it up. All right, so anyways, the long and short of it is we've got a couple interesting questions.
Yeah, were they my questions?
No.
Yeah. All right.
But like, okay, so remember Moses fled?
This is Egyptian Prince Moses. So that he was Prince of Egypt. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So remember how Moses fled?
Yes, because he killed somebody?
Yeah, and he didn't want to get killed by the Pharaoh, presumably?
Presumably, yes.
Yeah. So how is he just like sauntering back into Egypt?
Well, it mentions that pretty quickly here, I think.
It does?
Yeah, because it said, you know, all your enemies are dead.
Did it?
Either in this chapter or the next one.
Oh, I must have missed that part. Interesting. Well, I'll be interested to know when that turns up.
Okay.
Because right now we don't have a good explanation for how Moses just walks up into Egypt.
Yeah, but
when he was a fugitive.
No, God mentions that. Says it to Moses himself.
Says what?
That all his enemies are dead.
Right, but he hasn't said it yet.
Right, not yet. I don't know where it is.
We can just look it up.
Okay.
Let's see where that one shows up. That's in chapter 4, verse 19.
Okay, so it's next.
So it's the next chapter. Week. So this is presumably during the same conversation. And if you go down to 4:19, yeah, he does say that down here. Yep. Moses went back to his father-in-law. Right. Okay. So yes, Moses whoever was theoretically going to kill Moses is now dead.
Yeah.
How long do you think Moses lived?
Well, probably about, 100 years or something?
Maybe.
I mean, the ages were getting down there, but
Yeah, I had a question.
maybe 80.
Could be 80.
All right. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah. So listen to what God tells Moses. Says, they will heed your voice and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt. So they're going to go to the Pharaoh, which is interesting because in the narrative, they switch back and forth between
Yeah.
king and Pharaoh.
Right.
That's another good literary point to pick up. I assume we can track the title Pharaoh and king.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
My guess is that king is the older manuscript and that Pharaoh is later, because I know
I believe that. Yeah.
for sure from history, the title of Pharaoh came later. He used to actually be called king. According to the documentary hypothesis, we've got the book open right here. We're in verse 18. Verse 18 is attributed to the Elohist, which I've always theorized was the older text.
Okay.
So that would check out.
Mm.
But again, that theory is not without dissenters.
Well,
So
just like every theory.
I know, right? Every theory is still contentious,
Mm.
or else it wouldn't be a theory. It is interesting though, that like, so God said, tell Pharaoh that I want you to take the people out into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord. But like, that's not what God is intending to do.
Right.
God is intending to free them.
Yeah.
So why didn't God just say to Moses, go to the Pharaoh and tell the Pharaoh, let my people go?
Well, you mentioned this before, that it was not uncommon for them to do this, right? To go out for a few days, sacrifice to their God, and come back.
Right.
Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so nothing is out of the ordinary yet.
Right, but I'm saying if God's actual goal is to free his people from Egypt, why is he telling Moses to go ask Pharaoh just to let them go for 3 days into the desert, when that's not really his intention? His intention is just to free them.
I think later on we find out why that is. Let's see.
Do you think God's trying to take them on a step-by-step journey?
No. I think what's going on is God's trying to have a reason to show his power.
Yeah.
Because it even mentions that, so.
Sure. Yeah, it does mention that, by the way, and we're going to have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I thought that was in this chapter, but.
It does come up in chapter 3 and 4, actually.
Okay.
Actually, it comes up a lot in the next couple chapters.
Mm.
But I just found it interesting that, like, if God wanted his people to be let go, would he not just say to Moses, go tell him to let my people go?
Or God could snap his fingers. What's your point?
Yeah, God could just snap his fingers and translocate everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like he did. And that is the other thing. Okay, when you think about the atrocities that happened to the Egyptians,
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine many of them innocent, like at least the babies that were killed.
Right.
Man, it's just hard. It's hard to read, because if you believe that God is all powerful, he could just snap his fingers and translocate. But then how could he display how awesome and strong and dangerous he is?
I don't want to say dangerous, but strong.
But like, is that a reasonable display of power?
What? Killing babies?
Yeah.
Well, no. Obviously, we're going to have some issue with some of the things he did. You know.
We'll have to get there.
We'll get there.
Well, let's read 19 and 20.
Okay. But I'm sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, not even by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do in its midst. And after that, he will let you go. So are we not talking about the plagues yet, or are we?
I think he is.
Because Moses really hasn't even asked if they could all leave yet. Like, for good, right?
Right.
Okay.
So There's so many questions here with verse 19 and 20, and I don't want to drag it out forever, but like,
I do.
okay, if God is sure that the king of Egypt will not let them go,
Yeah.
even by a mighty hand, then why does he need to harden Pharaoh's heart?
But that's, well, we haven't mentioned that yet.
I think, and this is my reading of the text,
Uh-huh.
I think what's actually happened here is he's suggesting that, yes, after I display my mighty hand, then he will let you go.
Mm.
But then after that, I'm still going to harden his heart. I think the traditional reading of the text is that God is saying here that he's going to keep you no matter what until I do all of my plagues. Once I do all of my plagues, then he will let you go. But that's not true, because if you read the story, after like the fourth or the fifth plague, he's ready to let him go.
Well, yeah.
And then
right.
God hardened his heart, clearly in an effort to keep them there longer so he can display his power.
Right.
Which means God went above and beyond what he needed to in order just to get them to be let go.
Mm-hmm.
So verse 19 and 20 doesn't encompass everything God is intending to do, only part of what God is intending to do.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Nope.
Cool. Let's finish it out. Let's read 20 and 22.
All right. 21, 22.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall be, when you go, that you shall not go empty-handed, but every woman shall ask of her neighbor, namely, of her who dwells near her house, articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing, and ye shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians. So, asking someone for donations is now considered plundering. Methinks that God is saying that he will make their neighbors give them all this stuff. Like it's not a choice. Otherwise, why all the money and why refer to it as a plunder? Also, they were only going to be gone for 3 days. So I guess they were lying at that point, or I don't get that.
Well, that's the thing is,
when they had said, hey, we need 3 days off, were they intending to leave forever at that point?
that's the thing. My understanding of the text is that God is telling Moses the full plan. The plan is to do all these signs and wonders, and then eventually you guys go free.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what you're going to tell the Pharaoh. What you're going to tell the Pharaoh is that I want you to let my people go and worship me for 3 days in the wilderness.
Okay.
So right now, God is intending to have Moses tell Pharaoh something other than what God actually is going to fully do. It's almost like God wants to lead Pharaoh down a particular path rather than going directly to the end game.
Okay. Because
God knows the end game is going free. Moses knows the end game is going free. Pharaoh does not know this, according to what we're told.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we read further in the text, it might become more clear. But so far, for what we're told, God is not hinting or suggesting that Pharaoh is going to be told to let the people go permanently.
Okay.
Right? So it's weird. You know, again, I have the same question. Why would God not just say, Moses, go and tell Pharaoh to say, let my people go? If that's the end goal. Like, why tiptoe through it?
I don't know. The point is, the Pharaoh didn't even let them go for the 3 days.
But he was going to. In fact, he did let them go for the 3 days. And then, as he was letting them go, he asked Moses and Aaron to pray for him.
Well, that's probably much later on, because I certainly didn't see that.
Yeah, it's in like chapter somewhere between 6 and 8. I forget.
It's kind of cheating. You can't use information we don't already have.
Sorry, I've read it.
Just so you know.
But he does actually let them go into the wilderness. His heart does soften on his own at one point,
Okay.
which is why God had to harden it,
Mm-hmm.
because God wasn't done doing all the works that he wanted to do yet.
Right.
Right. But to the point, God's end goal here is to plunder the Egyptians, as you said, but I don't know why. Why does God want them to plunder the Egyptians? Because did the Egyptians really do anything wrong, or was it the Egyptian government?
Well, that's, I mean, it's really hard to tell. I know a lot of people would say that if the Egyptians really had a problem, they'd overthrow their government.
Right.
I think people use that excuse even today.
They were complicit.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to agree with that, because I would be complicit in a lot of things my government does too, then.
Fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point. I only had one more question.
Uh-huh.
Most narratives in the Bible, especially when we're talking about plunder or booty or spoils of war, so often that plunder is taking the possessions by force.
Yeah.
And typically taking it from other men.
Okay.
This is kind of an unusual instance where women, and I don't know why it only mentions women,
Mm-hmm.
it says every woman will ask of her neighbor, namely of her who dwells near her house, for articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. It doesn't say anything about the men, actually.
Hey, every woman shall ask of her neighbor, and her neighbors are going to be Egyptians, right?
Yeah.
That means these Israelites, they have houses.
They must.
They're not like living in abject squalor or what have you.
They absolutely. In fact, now that you mentioned that, I'm going to put a note. Let me grab, let's see. You shall ask her neighbor, living in her neighbor's house. Because that's a really good point. I've been kind of documenting some of the breadcrumbs on what type of living situation they were actually in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they were in what we would call slavery.
Right.
Even though it says in the narrative that they were, it's such a broad word. To be in Evid in Hebrew is such a broad word. I'm glad you pointed that out, because reading it, if they had houses, and if their houses were among their own Egyptian neighbors,
Right.
Man, you kind of have to believe that they weren't necessarily what we would call slaves, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. Good point.
Thanks.
I have nothing left to add.
All right.
Yeah. So next week, let's do 4 and 5. Maybe we can start early next week.
How about 4, 5, and 6?
That's not going to happen.
Well, let's start at like 5 o'clock.
I'm working till 5 o'clock.
Get off early.
Remember, some of us work.
Why don't you go to work early?
That's not going to happen.
Get off early.
Then I have to go to bed early.
I don't know about that.
I'll pray about it.
Thank you. That's the least you can do.
I'll let you know if the Lord softens or hardens my heart to that position.
Great.
It will be determined by the will of the Lord.
Well, great. All right.
Anything to add before we close it?
No, nothing to add.
I know you're so disappointed
One
we didn't.
chapter.
The next chapter is even longer than this chapter.
Yeah, except I want to be done in 5 months.
You don't just get it because you want it. I don't know if you know how that works.
We'll see.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for being with us. Hopefully next week we'll be able to cover 2 chapters.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Start early, go a little bit longer, see if we can get 2 chapters in.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if there's something in these verses that you think we missed, questions that should have been asked that weren't asked, answers that maybe weren't given that should have been given, let us know. We're always curious to learn more about the narrative, figure out what kind of plot holes we can plug up and fix, what kind of questions have answers we didn't consider.
I still don't understand 21 and 22.
Oh, what's the problem?
When are they? When are the Jews trying to get money from the Egyptians? When?
Oh, that literally happens as they're leaving.
Where? When are they leaving?
In Exodus?
For the 3 days?
No, no. This is not about the 3 days.
You don't think?
No. This is about leaving. That's why in verse
It
20,
doesn't say they're leaving.
it does. In verse 20, it says, "I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all of my wonders, which I will do in its midst. And then after that, he will let you go."
So this is in the future.
It's in the future, yeah.
Oh, because I thought they were talking about it right now, and I'm like, why would they do that when they're coming back? It's
Oh,
gonna
no,
be really
absolutely
awkward.
not. No. This is talking. He's still laying out the roadmap for the future.
Okay,
When
that makes
they
a lot
let you
more
go.
sense. Okay.
And this actually happens if you read the story. As
Okay.
they're leaving, they're given all of this, gold and livestock.
Well,
and
maybe
other
at
stuff.
that point, the Egyptians are either really afraid of them, so they're going to do anything,
Yes.
or they feel really bad for them.
I think both. Right?
Yeah, you were talking, and I'm just looking at this, and I'm like, this does not make sense yet.
Does it make sense now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll catch you in next week on Tuesday. We're doing this on Tuesdays now instead of Mondays.
Right.
And the reason is because it fits better into our workout schedule.
Correct.
But anyways, we're having a great time, guys. Thank you for being here.